Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling some really fascinating source material. We've got excerpts presenting two incredibly distinct approaches to facing life, tackling challenges, and frankly, just becoming more of who you're capable of being.
Absolutely. Two very different worlds, it seems.
Totally. I've been digging into excerpts from David Goggins' powerhouse book, Can't Hurt Me, and let me tell you, this is all about forging yourself into an absolute weapon through sheer, unadulterated toughness.
Goggins. Intense stuff.
Oh yeah, it's the path of iron, meeting suffering head on and just refusing to yield.
And, well, I've been immersing myself in selections from Stories of Master Ching Kung, Part 3, which offers, I'd say, a profoundly different perspective.
Right.
This path isn't really about external conquest. It's much more about deep inner purification, cultivating spiritual wisdom, and finding a lasting ease and transformation that originates entirely from within. It's really a path of peace, of understanding the mind rather than just trying to dominate it through, well, brute force, maybe.
See, right away, you can feel the tension, can't you? My sources are saying the way to become unstoppable is to embrace the pain, run towards the suffering, literally build calluses on your mind by forcing yourself through impossible physical and mental obstacles. It's about taking that bad hand you were dealt and, punching it into submission until it gives you what you want.
Whereas my sources teach that true strength and liberation come not from fighting the external world or even your own discomfort with force, but from understanding that suffering actually arises from the mind itself, from our attachments, our ignorance, our reactivity.
Okay, so the source is different.
Exactly. The path here is to gently purify the mind, letting go of what binds us, finding peace and freedom by transforming our internal state, not by externally conquering pain. You see, one seems to, pile on the difficulty.
Yeah.
The other seeks to dissolve it from the source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That seems like such a fundamental difference. I mean, how can pushing yourself until you basically break and then letting go of everything, how can those possibly connect?
It seems paradoxical.
It does. But that's our deep dive today. We're going to unpack each of these powerful yet seemingly opposite philosophies in detail. We'll try to understand their core mechanics and then, maybe surprisingly, explore where these paths of iron and peace might actually intersect and even, dare I say, complement each other.
That'll be interesting to see where the overlap is.
Yeah, let's see what these sources really reveal about mastery. Okay, let's jump into the first source material, those excerpts from Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Okay.
Now, if you know anything about Goggins, you know his reputation. He's the guy who ran hundreds of miles on broken feet, did Hell Week multiple times, held the pull-up world record. His book is just raw, direct, unapologetic.
It's intense.
It is. It's presented as a memoir of his journey, but also very much as a guide, like a blueprint for extreme self-mastery through confronting and overcoming weakness.
And he is brutally honest about where that journey started, isn't he? He describes himself in the book as a street loser who was, in his own words, dealt a truly bad hand in life.
Yeah.
And this isn't hyperbole. The source really lays out a childhood filled with immense trauma.
Yeah, it's tough reading, honestly. He details experiencing severe domestic abuse from a very young age, like starting around 1 year old and continuing intensely until he was about 9.
Wow.
This wasn't just, occasional hardship. It was a constant toxic environment that had lasting impacts.
And that kind of chronic stress, it manifested physically and mentally, didn't it? The source mentions it contributed to him developing a stutter.
Right.
And being diagnosed with documented learning disabilities when he was around 10 to 12 years old.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to navigate school and the world with those challenging on top of everything else.
Seriously. And the physical toll was significant too. The book describes him carrying literal scars from the physical abuse he endured, specifically mentioning whippings. But the hardship wasn't just confined to his home. He talks about facing relentless external challenges as well.
Yeah, he recounts periods where he was the only black student in his classes, facing overt and consistent racism. The source highlights these experiences happening throughout his teenage years, from around 13 through 18. So you've got trauma and abuse at home, learning difficulties, physical scars, and systemic prejudice outside. It's the most unbelievable stack of obstacles.
It really is. And you think most people facing even a fraction of that might understandably succumb to feeling like a victim, right? Defined by their circumstances.
Easily.
But the absolutely critical pivot point in Goggins' narrative, and really the foundation of his whole philosophy, is his absolute refusal to let those experiences dictate his future.
Right.
He makes a conscious decision, it seems, to take ownership, to stop making excuses, and to start fighting back not just against the world, but against the limitations his own mind had accepted.
And that brings us right to his core belief, the engine driving his transformation. Only you can master your mind. He presents this not as some passive idea, but as an active process, what he actually terms an evolution algorithm. An algorithm, interesting. Yeah, like a specific, repeatable set of actions and ways of thinking designed to fundamentally change your capabilities and your perception of yourself.
Okay, let's break down some of the key components of this evolution algorithm from the source. The first one is the accountability mirror and post-it notes.
Ah, yes.
This sounds almost deceptively simple, doesn't it? But the way he describes it, it's a brutal, non-negotiable practice.
It's about radical self-honesty, isn't it? Goggins talks about stripping away all the stories and excuses we tell ourselves and forcing yourself to look at your actual physical reflection in a mirror and confront the reality of who you are right now. Your flaws, your weaknesses, your failures, everything.
He literally writes down his perceived flaws and his goals on post-it notes and sticks them to the mirror.
Right there.
Every morning, he looks at them, speaks truth to himself, apparently, and makes a vow to tackle those flaws and work towards those goals. It's about taking absolute responsibility for everything in your life.
Regardless of whether the results from the previous day or week were good or bad, you hold yourself accountable. No blaming others, no externalizing. It's all on you. This daily confrontation is designed to build a foundation of, like, brutal self-awareness and drive action.
Then there's the concept that's become almost synonymous with Goggins, the 40% rule.
Yes. This is a core tenet of his physical and mental endurance philosophy. The idea is that when you're engaged in something difficult, a physical challenge, a mentally draining task, and you reach that point where your mind is screaming at you to stop.
We've all been there.
Right. Where you feel completely spent, utterly exhausted, like you've hit an insurmountable wall. Well, his point is you've only actually accessed about 40% of your true capability.
40%. It feels like zero when you're in that state.
Exactly. That feeling of hitting the wall is primarily a psychological barrier, not really a physical one. Your mind, in its protective capacity, it wants you to stop the discomfort and pain.
Yeah, makes sense.
The 40% rule is the reminder that you have vast untapped reserves, physical, mental, emotional, beyond that initial point of perceived failure. The rule encourages you to recognize that feeling of wanting to quit as the 40% marker. And intentionally push past it to see what you're truly capable of.
Which leads directly into the idea of creating an armored mind, or a calloused mind.
Right. If the 40% rule is about identifying the psychological barrier, creating a calloused mind is the process of pushing through it repeatedly to make that barrier less impactful over time.
So it's the practice.
It's the practice. Goggins advocates for intentionally seeking out and enduring suffering and discomfort, both physically and mentally.
He's not saying be reckless, but actively put yourself in situations where you are uncomfortable, where you have to struggle. The purpose isn't suffering for its own sake, obviously, but using that suffering as resistance training for your mind. Just like lifting weights builds muscle, enduring hardship builds mental toughness, those calluses on your mind.
And he provides some pretty extreme examples from his own life to illustrate this. The source mentions him having major heart surgery not once, but twice. And yet still pushing his physical limits in training and competition.
Yeah, the story of him running ultramarathons with broken bones, actual stress fractures, is almost hard to believe.
It's insane.
He describes competing in races in immense pain, pushing through for hours. His point is to prove definitively that the body is capable. It starts and ends in the mind.
Mind over matter.
Totally.
Yeah.
Your physical limitations are often dictated by your mental ones. By callousing your mind, you unlock that physical potential.
Okay, next up is the cookie jar.
The cookie jar. This one feels like a strategic tool for when you're in the thick of enduring that discomfort.
It absolutely is. The cookie jar is your mental bank of every single challenge you've ever overcome, every difficult situation you powered through, every time you faced adversity and didn't quit, every goal you achieved through sheer grit.
And the key is to actively collect those memories, right? Not just let them fade.
Precisely. When you're facing a current hardship, when your mind is telling you to stop, you actively reach into that mental cookie jar. You retrieve a specific memory of a past success against the odds, a moment of resilience. You relive it, drawing energy and motivation from the knowledge that you've been in tough spots before, you overcame that, and therefore, you can absolutely get through this.
So you're leveraging your own history as fuel.
Exactly.
Now, this next one has a more confrontational edge.
Yeah.
Harvest souls.
Yeah, this is presented as a psychological tactic, particularly applicable in competitive environments, though he suggests it can also be turned inward against your own weaknesses. Goggins talks about using your superior preparation, performance, and mental strength to basically break the will of your opponent.
Whether that's a competitor in a race, maybe a colleague vying for the same promotion, or even that voice of doubt in your own head.
Yes. By demonstrating your unwavering discipline, your ability to push past limits they can't even fathom, your sheer resilience, you essentially harvest their soul. You
Wow.
break their spirit, show them they can't compete at your level of mental toughness, and establish your dominance through your actions. It's a powerful, if maybe aggressive, psychological edge.
Definitely sounds aggressive. And finally, there's the principle of standout.
This is about the relentless pursuit of excellence and avoiding complacency at all costs. Goggins emphasizes never being satisfied with where you are, no matter how much you've achieved.
So that feeling of comfort, of having made it, isn't a reward to be savored.
No.
It's fuel to be burned to drive you to the next level.
Exactly. It's a mindset of continuous growth, of constantly demanding more of yourself, setting higher standards, and pushing past perceived finish lines. It's about establishing yourself as someone who doesn't just perform well, but consistently stands out because you are never stagnant, always seeking to improve.
So summing up Goggins' path, as shown in these sources, he doesn't claim to be naturally gifted or some kind of genius.
No.
He sees himself as someone who forged a unique kind of strength, a warrior built through intentional, extreme hardship.
And he is incredibly clear that this path is uncomfortable, it's painful, it's demanding, there's no sugarcoating it.
Not at all.
But his central argument is that by intentionally seeking, accepting, and enduring that discomfort and pain, by developing those mental calluses, you reach a state where pain loses its ability to control you. You become resilient, capable, somebody who can't be harmed by pain in the sense that it no longer dictates your actions or limits your potential.
It's a really challenging, high-impact philosophy.
Right.
For you listening, just thinking about your own life, where are you maybe hitting that 40% mark? What is one uncomfortable thing you could intentionally lean into today, maybe just a small one, to start building a mental callus? Or what's one past challenge you overcame that you could put in your cookie jar and draw strength from right now?
Interesting questions. Now, let's perform a significant pivot and explore the source material from Stories of Master Ching Kung, Part 3.
Okay, complete shift.
Completely. If Goggins' book felt like a training manual for a Navy SEAL, this feels much more like Reflections from a Serene Monastery. Its focus is fundamentally different.
Right. While Goggins is all about building an external and internal fortress through confrontation with pain, this book is explicitly aimed at guiding readers towards true liberation and ease from within. The battlefield shifts entirely from the external world and physical pain to the inner landscape of the mind and emotions.
And the foundational principle here is a core tenet of Buddhist philosophy, powerfully stated. All dharmas arise from the mind.
Okay, dharmas, what does that mean here?
Dharmas here can refer to phenomena, reality, basically everything we perceive and experience. The teaching is that everything ultimately originates from our own mind, our thoughts, our intentions, our consciousness.
So if everything arises from the mind, then our ability to transform our experience, our fate, even our environment, resides within that same mind.
Exactly. The source emphasizes the incredible, often underestimated power of the mind to shape our reality.
Does it give examples?
It does. It mentions the work of Dr. Emoto, whose experiments with water crystals are often interpreted controversially, sometimes as showing how human thoughts and emotions might directly impact the physical structure of water.
Ah, I've heard of that.
Suggesting mind influences matter. And there's also the principle framed as thinking of Buddha becomes Buddha.
Okay.
In this context, it's not necessarily suggesting a literal magical transformation, but it points to the mind's immense capacity for self-transformation through concentrated focus. Whatever the mind dwells on intensely, it tends to become or align with.
So if your mind is constantly focused on purity, compassion, wisdom, those qualities become more dominant.
That's the idea. Those qualities become increasingly dominant in your being. Therefore, the path outlined in these stories is one of purifying and transforming the mind from within.
Makes sense.
The book presents various practices and principles for this, often through illustrative anecdotes from the lives of practitioners.
Like what? What's one of the principles?
One of the first principles mentioned is starting from zero.
Starting from zero, okay.
This is about cultivating profound humility and a beginner's mind, regardless of how much you think you know or how much you've achieved. It means constantly being willing to let go of your preconceptions, your past successes, your accumulated knowledge, even your identity, so you can remain open to continuous learning and growth.
It's about recognizing that you never really arrive. You're always on a journey.
Exactly. The source quotes, "Life is a changing game. We either get better or worse," which underscores the need for continuous positive transformation, which requires the humility to let go of the old self and old ways of thinking that might be holding you back, allowing yourself to always start from zero on the path of improvement. It's interesting, it contrasts subtly with Goggins' cookie jar.
How so?
Well, the cookie jar is about holding on to past achievements to fuel future effort, whereas this emphasizes the release of ego and attachment to achievement to facilitate ongoing growth. Different focus.
Interesting distinction. Okay, what else?
Then there's the principle of single subject, long-term immersion.
Okay, focused.
Deep focus.
Yeah.
This is about the power of profound focus and dedication. The path to deep understanding or spiritual realization isn't found by dabbling in many things, but by choosing one method, one scripture, one practice like chanting, meditation, or studying a specific text, and dedicating yourself to it with deep respect, unwavering discipline, and consistent effort over a long period of time.
And the source makes a powerful claim about the outcome of this kind of focus, right? That eventually enlightenment or meaning will be seen.
Yes. It suggests that it's through this deep, sustained immersion that profound insights and wisdom arise naturally.
Is there an example?
They provide the example of resident Hu Xiaolin, who is said to have read a particular scripture 1,000 times.
1,000 times.
Yeah, and the point isn't just rote memorization. It's presented as an active, focused engagement with the text repeated until its deeper meaning is fully absorbed and realized. It illustrates the power of that single subject, long-term immersion.
You can definitely see how this principle applies to mastering any complex skill, not just spiritual practices. Deep mastery requires deep focus over time.
Absolutely. Then, a practice that is highlighted, particularly in relation to the end of life, is letting go of all attachments, believing, chanting.
But get sound specific.
It is. It's presented as a powerful method for achieving a peaceful and conscious transition at death. It involves cultivating a deep faith, making a vow or aspiration towards a higher state or, say, a pure land, and engaging in the practice of chanting a Buddha's name, particularly in one's final moments.
And the source shares some pretty powerful, almost miraculous-sounding stories to illustrate this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They talk about Hai Xian's mother and a Mr. Xi from Kezu's father.
Yes. These individuals are described as having cultivated their practice throughout their lives such that at the very end, they were able to truly let go of all worldly worries, family attachments, possessions, basically everything that normally binds us to this life.
Wow, that's hard to imagine.
It is.
Oh.
And because they had cultivated firm faith and maintained dedicated chanting right up to their last breath, they are said to have achieved remarkably peaceful departures, free from fear or suffering. Some accounts even describe them passing away in a standing position. Standing, which is seen as a powerful sign of spiritual attainment in some traditions. The source emphasizes these are presented not as myths, but as real, verifiable accounts demonstrating the power of focused mind, faith, and attachment.
Okay, what about the ethical foundation?
Yes, sincerity, equality, reverence. This is presented as the fundamental attitude one should cultivate towards all other beings.
Break that down. Sincerity.
Sincerity means being genuine and truthful in heart and action. Equality means seeing all beings as fundamentally the same, deserving of compassion and respect, regardless of their external status or how they treat you.
Even if they treat you badly.
Especially then, perhaps. And reverence means approaching all interactions with a sense of respect, recognizing the inherent Buddha nature or potential in everyone.
And the stories of Monk Hai King and Monk Lao Day are used to exemplify this.
Exactly. These monks, living simple lives, were reportedly subjected to mistreatment, teasing, ridicule from others. However, instead of reacting with anger or resentment, they met this negativity with genuine sincerity and maintained their kind, equal regard for those mistreating them. The teaching is that by holding on to this internal state of sincerity, equality, and reverence, they were not harmed by the external negativity and in fact gained real spiritual benefit themselves.
So inner strength comes from maintaining virtue, not retaliating.
That's the idea. And this kindness extends beyond just humans to treating all beings kindly. This emphasizes the interconnectedness of all life and the importance of making positive connections, or dharma connections as they call it, with all sentient beings. Even seemingly insignificant interactions have meaning.
The brief mention of Venerable Sariputra in the bee story is supposed to illustrate this.
It's a concise illustration, yeah. Sariputra, a highly enlightened disciple, once helped a bee that was in distress, a simple act of kindness.
Right.
But it's said to have created a karmic connection that ultimately helped that bee on its long path towards enlightenment. It underscores the principle that every act of kindness towards any being, no matter how small, plants a seed that contributes to their eventual liberation.
So, summing up Master Ching Kung's path from these sources, it starts with recognizing life's inherent suffering. That's a common ground, maybe.
Yes, acknowledgement of suffering is there. But critically, it asserts that this suffering is not our fundamental state. Our true self-nature inherently possesses all virtues, wisdom, and capabilities. The path to overcoming suffering, therefore, is not an external battle, but an internal purification. By identifying and letting go of the root causes of suffering, things like greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and doubt.
The classic affliction.
Exactly. By letting those go, one can transform their internal state, which in turn leads to the elimination of external disasters and difficulties, and the attainment of genuine physical and mental health.
And the source culminates with the idea that true beauty and fulfillment don't come from external appearance or material success,
No.
but from cultivating a good heart, engaging in good deeds, and developing profound wisdom and virtue. It is a path of deep internal alignment and spiritual realization.
A very different flavor indeed.
And it offers a very different lens, doesn't it? For you listening, how might actively trying to cultivate inner peace, or maybe just becoming more aware of your thoughts and intentions, how might that shift your perspective on a current difficulty? What might it feel like to approach a challenge by letting go of the internal reaction to it rather than just trying to power through the external thing?
It's a different kind of strength.
All right, so we spent time with David Goggins' path of iron, embracing pain, forging toughness through extreme external challenge.
The armored mind.
Exactly. And we've explored Master Ching Kung's path of peace, cultivating inner calm, finding liberation by letting go of internal attachments.
The purified mind.
Yeah. And on the surface, they seem like diametrically opposed philosophies. One says, run towards the pain. The other says, dissolve the cause of suffering within.
They really do appear starkly different. One is focused on building an indestructible self capable of enduring anything the external world throws at it, almost by becoming harder than the suffering itself.
Right.
The other is focused on transforming the self from the root, so that external suffering maybe doesn't even register as pain because the internal state is one of peace and detachment. It feels like two different universes of self-improvement.
Totally. Yet the source material kind of prompts us to look closer, doesn't it? And that's where it gets really interesting. There seem to be profound points of connection, surprising areas where these seemingly opposite paths actually converge and reveal something deeper about human potential.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the first connection point?
The first one seems to be their shared goal, transcending limits. Despite their utterly different methods, both Goggins and Ching Kung are ultimately guiding people to move beyond their perceived capabilities and live fuller, more meaningful lives.
Okay, how so?
Well, Goggins pushes past limits by forcing the body and mind through intense physical and mental resistance, demonstrating that you are capable of far more than you think. He breaks through external and internal barriers with sheer will and endurance.
Right, and Master Ching Kung's teachings lead to transcending limits by freeing the mind from the internal constraints of greed, anger, ignorance, fear, all those vexations. This internal liberation allows one to overcome limitations imposed by their own limited understanding, opening up possibilities for profound personal and spiritual growth. So both paths, in their own unique way, lead to a form of freedom from constraint.
Interesting. Then consider potential and resilience. Goggins' 40% rule is fundamentally about recognizing untapped potential, right? But there's always more in the tank. And his cookie jar is a practice of leveraging past resilience to build strength for the present.
And this resonates quite strongly with Buddhist concepts. The idea that our inherent self-nature is fully capable and possessing all virtues is actually akin to Goggins' 40% rule, suggesting we have vast inherent potential waiting to be unleashed.
Oh, interesting parallel.
And the Buddhist practice of accumulating good roots through virtuous actions and practices is somewhat similar to building the cookie jar. You are cultivating positive energy and strength through past positive efforts and experiences that can be drawn upon in times of need. Both acknowledge an inner reservoir of strength built over time.
Wow. Okay, the most striking connection, for me anyway, is around mind over matter. Goggins embodies this by forging that armored mind that allows him to push his body through what seems physically impossible.
Like running on broken bones.
Exactly. His mental toughness literally overrides his physical limitations.
And Master Ching Kung's stories offer different yet equally powerful examples of mind over matter. Those accounts of individuals healing severe illnesses through focused thought, or achieving peaceful deaths by letting go of worry and concentrating the mind on chanting.
Right.
They demonstrate the mind's ability to influence physical reality and experience in profound ways.
So what this comparison reveals, maybe, is a spectrum of mind over matter. Goggins uses the mind as a hammer, callousing it, visualizing success, forcing the body through pain, its active resistance and dominance. Ching Kung's examples use the mind more like a cultivator, purifying it, letting go, achieving profound results through subtle internal alignment and focus.
Exactly. And Goggins isn't just a physical specimen. The source notes that in moments of extreme pain during races, he would actively visualize himself overcoming the obstacle and rely on that hardened, calloused mind to keep moving.
So it's an internal act, too.
It's not just brute force, it's a specific application of mental control, an internal act supporting external endurance. This really shows that even his path of iron is, at its core, about the mastery of the mind. Just applied in a different way than Ching Kung's path of peace. Both demonstrate that the ultimate arbiter of success or failure really is the state of the mind.
There's also a shared value, it seems, in honesty and responsibility. Goggins' accountability mirror practice is all about facing harsh truths about yourself, making no excuses for your current situation or past failures. Brutal honesty.
And Master Ching Kung's teachings include the principle of sincere facing, not self-deception. Both philosophies demand that brutal honesty with oneself is the absolute prerequisite for change.
You can't fix what you won't face.
Precisely. You cannot transform yourself, whether through external effort or internal purification, if you are not willing to look truthfully at your starting point and take responsibility for your actions and inactions.
Okay, what about discipline and focused effort? Goggins overcame a severe stutter, which is a product of childhood trauma, through relentless disciplined speech practice, transforming himself into a confident, reliable public speaker. That took incredible discipline.
And Master Chin Kung's principle of single-subject, long-term immersion underscores the absolute necessity of discipline and sustained focus over time to achieve any profound result.
Right, like understanding scripture after 1,000 readings.
Or mastering any complex skill. Both paths fundamentally rely on the cultivation of discipline and the ability to direct one's energy and attention consistently towards a goal. That seems to be the bedrock of achievement in both models. It's not just what you do, but the disciplined way you do it day after day.
Right, the consistency. And finally, the source touches on intentional living. Goggins emphasizes strict discipline in scheduling his time, planning his day down to the minute sometimes, to optimize productivity and training.
And Master Chin Kung advises analyzing one's schedule to cut useless habits, burn trash BS, as the source puts it rather bluntly.
Yeah.
Both approaches are about being highly intentional with how you spend your most precious resources, time, and energy.
Makes sense.
They advocate for eliminating distractions and focusing your efforts on meaningful pursuits, whether that's Goggins' physical and mental training or the spiritual cultivation like scripture reading and chanting found in Chin Kung's path, which also requires immense discipline.
So both point towards a more focused, efficient, and ultimately more meaningful way of living by actively managing your life rather than letting it manage you.
Seems so.
And going back to that initial point of tension, Goggins, in his memoir, actually shares that while initial rage and insecurity fueled his early drives, to prove everyone wrong and overcome his past ultimately, releasing that hatred and resentment brought him a deeper form of peace.
Ah, so he found letting go beneficial too.
Apparently. That moment of conscious letting go, acknowledging that holding on to anger was actually holding him back, it really echoes the fundamental wisdom of detachment found throughout Master Ching Kung's teachings. That true peace often comes not from gripping tighter, but from releasing.
That's a powerful convergence point. So building on these surprising points of convergence, we can start to see how these two seemingly opposite paths could actually serve the listener in complementary ways, maybe addressing different needs or stages in their journey towards mastery.
Exactly. If you're listening and you're feeling lost, maybe at a real low point, feeling useless, afraid, or just completely overwhelmed and insecure, those moments Goggins describes as being stuck with a bad hand.
Yeah.
His book, Can't Hurt Me, it offers a lifeline almost.
How so?
It serves as that relentless battle buddy who won't let you make excuses. It provides a practical, albeit incredibly demanding, blueprint for facing the brutal reality of your situation, taking ownership, and using pain and discomfort as the very fuel to start moving forward.
So it's about getting unstuck.
Yeah, it shows you concrete steps to break through perceived limits and begin forging that can't-be-harmed mindset. It's the kick in the pants you might need when you feel stuck, demonstrating that when you live this way, there's no stopping point in terms of building raw resilience and capability to tackle external challenges and overcome that internal resistance to effort.
Okay. Conversely, if your struggle is maybe less about initiating external action and more about finding inner peace, dealing with pervasive anxiety, anger, or that deep-seated unhappiness that maybe external achievements haven't resolved.
Right.
If you are seeking wisdom, a fundamental transformation of your internal state, and ultimately freedom from suffering and mental vexations, then Master Ching Kung's book offers a very different kind of guide.
So it addresses the inner world more directly.
Precisely. It provides the wisdom and practices for cultivating inner calm, teaching you how to potentially heal your body and mind by purifying your thoughts and intentions. It guides you towards living in harmony with yourself and others, and shows a path towards genuine liberation from the roots of suffering.
So while Goggins excels at showing you how to build astonishing willpower and endure external pressure, Master Chin Kung's teachings help you understand the deeper source of suffering and inner strength within the mind itself.
Right. His wisdom guides you to direct that mental energy towards profound spiritual growth and lasting peace that isn't dependent on external circumstances.
And this is where the mutual promotion becomes really clear, I think. Goggins gives you the practical, demanding tools to build the initial grit, face the external fight, and overcome the inertia of feeling stuck. He helps you build the engine and the armor, so to speak.
Okay. And Master Chin Kung's wisdom then becomes maybe the crucial spiritual refueling station, or perhaps the compass for that journey.
Exactly. After pushing through the discomfort and building that external strength using Goggins' methods, his teachings help you understand the deeper meaning behind the struggle,
Ah,
guiding you towards using that newfound discipline and resilience for something more profound than just external achievement.
so it adds depth and direction.
Yeah, it helps you channel that hardened mindset towards cultivating genuine inner peace and wisdom, allowing you to find the well-earned calm that comes not just from conquering challenges, but from purifying the mind itself.
So the ultimate outcome of integrating these two paths isn't just becoming someone capable of incredible physical feats or external success,
Right.
but becoming a true master of the mind in its fullest sense. Someone who possesses the iron will to endure external hardship with grace and the profound inner peace and wisdom to navigate life with clarity and liberation.
Beautifully put. And that brings us towards the end of this deep dive, where we started with two seemingly opposite philosophies, the path of iron and the path of peace, and discovered their surprising and powerful connections in the pursuit of human potential and true mastery of the mind.
We've seen how pushing limits through pain with David Goggins and finding liberation through inner peace with Master Ching Kung both ultimately emphasize the incredible power of the mind, the importance of resilience, the necessity of honesty, the foundational role of discipline, and the value of intentional living. Common threads, really.
Definitely. It leaves us with this to maybe ponder. Given the insights from both challenging yourself externally and cultivating your inner landscape, how can you listening integrate both pushing your own limits and cultivating inner calm in your life right now? They aren't mutually exclusive. Perhaps they are two sides of the same coin of mastery.
Which aspect resonates most deeply with you today? Is it the call to face reality and push through discomfort when you feel like stopping? The Goggins approach.
Or is it the wisdom of letting go of anxiety and purifying your inner state to find peace? The Ching Kung perspective.
And based on what resonates most right now, what's just one small step you might take today, inspired by either source, to move closer to becoming a master of your own mind?
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.